Hi guys, we're live.
Hi everyone, welcome to day 3 of Lightbox Expo Online 2020. We have been having the most incredible weekend and it's about to get way better with this panel. We are Christine and Colin Poole, and today we have the incredible honor of talking to these amazing sculptors. We have the Shiflett brothers, Brandon and Jared, Dan Chadinsky, Patrick Masson from France, and for those of you who are tuning in who had hoped to talk to Bryn, she had a scheduling conflict, and we are working out right now where Doug happens to be, and we're hoping he's able to join us. But we are going to get started right away. So today we're going to be talking about critters, concepts, and clay. So we have the finest critters and creatures and concept developers in the industry and in the fine art world, and we are going to get into all kinds of details about how we do our work and how we get our inspiration and what kind of clays we use, and it's going to be a lot of fun. So none of our panelists need any introduction, but we are going to let them tell you just a tiny bit about themselves, and we're going to get started. So let's start with Brandon and Jared.
Hey y'all, what's
up?
Guys.
So we are the Shiflett brothers. I'm Brandon.
I'm Jared.
And we are self-taught sculptors out of Texas. And we began our careers working on a lot of licensed products from Marvel, and have sort of transitioned into the latter part, doing our own concepts, our own designs.
Original designs.
Right. And we love comic books. We love science fiction and horror and fantasy. And we're just trying to sculpt cool things in the genres we love.
Yeah, we love the statues and the resin kits and the monster movies and just X-Men and that kind of silver age maybe of comic books. And we're happy to be here, and we just want to say Doug Stannett and Bryn Metheny are the bomb, and we'll see y'all at the next convention.
Can you, I know this is kind of hard, but can you just tell us a little bit about some of the awards you guys have won?
There haven't been many, really. What happened? We won the gold.
We won the gold award.
And we won the Spectrum Silver.
Won the gold award for dimensional work at Spectrum. We won a few years earlier. We won the silver award for dimensional work at Spectrum.
Didn't somebody say that we're like the Bernini of the sculpting, fantasy sculpting world?
Oh, we love that. Hey, can we quote you on that?
Too late.
Yeah,
we can use that.
We're going to write that down, right? We have to write it down right now. Thank you very much. That's very nice of you to say.
People have, we worship, we really look up to Frank Frazetta. People have compared us to Frazetta sometimes as like a sculpting equivalent, or that people have said we have a sort of painterly feel, maybe. We just think we kind of leave our stuff rough and sloppy, but people appreciate that, and I think a lot of times we're associated with Frazetta stuff.
And we just quit on it early. We just kind of give up on it about 4/5 of the way, and people take that as artistic, and we're like, yes.
We love that aspect of it. That's the first thing that caught my eye was just how rough it was, and yeah, it's the painterly version of sculpting.
I appreciate that.
Thank you.
You guys may be downplaying a little bit, but you are definitely icons in the field.
Thank you. I really appreciate that.
Wow, that is nice of you to say.
So thank you. And Dan?
Hi, my name is Dan Chadinsky. I actually work as the curator of the Maz Museum by day, which is the world's largest collection of original art from picture books. But when I'm not doing that, I'm in the studio, usually working on creatures. I will preface this by saying that my pathway to becoming a creature artist, I think I was always destined to, but it definitely was not a linear path. I originally went to college to be an attorney. I was studying history, and I was very close to that law degree. And then I went to Rome, and I knew that I did not want to be an attorney. I was going to be a sculptor, so I ended up finishing both degrees. And then 2 days out of college, I did not have a plan. Wasn't going to go into business with my father, who is an attorney. Instead, I snuck into a tour of a special effects studio, and I was also moonlighting as a taxidermist for the Toledo Zoo, which is something that I still do. And I do bring my work home from me. That's both living creatures and sometimes dead. It helps to have had a mother that was a college biology professor, so she was great and enabled me. She taught anatomy, amongst other things. And I do have a sister that is a mortician. So I was brought up in a family where this type of thing was completely normal. And I was definitely the kid that wanted to grow up, and live in the Addams Family house. And now I do. This is not staged. It's just the study.
You kind of look normal.
My darkness is on the inside, Colin.
Keep it bottled up.
Yeah.
Okay, thanks so much, and we're so happy you're here. And Patrick?
Yeah, so I'm Patrick Masson. I'm from France, as you can hear, I think. So my path is not linear also, because I first started as an engineer, mechanical engineer. I worked in the automotive industry for 10 years. So nothing to do with sculpting at all. But I was sculpting as a hobby with Fimo since I was 15 years old, something like that. And I used to sculpt comics characters that I liked, not the US one, but the European ones. And I was just doing some gifts to my friends and family, so sculpting by pleasure only. And so so 10 years ago, in 2011, I decided to quit my job as an engineer and move to the full sculpting time as a freelance sculptor. And now, since then, I'm working for a board games company mostly. So doing miniatures work for miniature board game. So doing the masters, then they are produced in series. And in parallel to that, I try for a couple of years now to do a bit more of personal piece and trying to search for my artistic path, I would say like that, and try to do a bit more personal work in that, yeah, like that.
And those personal works, how have they been received?
They have been received pretty well. I'm quite happy because the first one I did is this one, and it was featured in the Spectrum 23, and it was nominated for the Dimensional Award that year. And my last piece was called Reflection, got the Gold Award in the Spectrum 26. So I'm quite very honored and touched by that.
People kind of like that stuff.
So thank you. Thank you.
Cool. Well, thank you, and welcome all of you for being here, and thanks so much for taking the time to chat with us. We're going to start with just a couple of super quick
Yeah, we're going to go
questions.
through real quick stuff.
So our first question, which I'm going to pose to Colin first, is what is the weirdest material you have ever made a sculpture out of?
And as my brain is clicking on this, I'm thinking, oh, Dan is just going to rock this one
He's
out.
gonna win.
So we won't even ask Dan. Roofing nails and blocks of ice is probably one of the more bizarre ones. How about you?
Iron ore pellets. If you don't know what those are, if you're in Michigan, there are all these train tracks and they have all these little iron ore pellets all over. I made a sculpture out of those ones.
Shiflets, what's the weirdest?
What is something
possibly
weird?
Just newspaper?
Yeah, we've
done
like
some life-size newspaper comic book characters.
We've done a lot of like small town theater stuff, and so anything is fair game for Man of La Mancha or whatever.
For masks and props. Yeah, newspaper I think is what's bizarre for us.
Patrick, what do you have this weird?
the first one is this thing, the blue tack, you know, the thing that sticks to anything, and you can glue something on. So I did something sculpted with this one. It did not last very long, for sure. If
it holds still long enough, you're going to sculpt it.
Just if you can't afford the other materials, you can always use glue tack.
Okay, Dan, go weird on us.
Go, Dan.
I've used my wisdom teeth in the sculpture. Those made it into one. And I also have used, my grandpa gave me one of his gold fillings that made it into one of my life-size characters before he died.
Did he know in advance?
Yeah, that was a point of pride for him, that was his tooth in that piece.
Wow.
Nice.
Okay, so second quick question. What's the smallest and the biggest sculpture you've ever made? So for me, smallest is about this big, and we know who's going to win the little sculpture category. And the biggest was a 7-foot monument that we did for the Carnegie Library.
And no surprise, we're doing them together, so I'm the same.
Same answer.
Right.
Shiflets.
Yeah. Shiflets.
So the biggest is life size for sure. We did a chupacabra, with these giant wings that was made in bronze and put out on a ranch. We don't go very small.
Yeah, a lot of our tricks kind of start to break down at around 3 or 4 inches, you know, whatever
but it's probably
we're doing.
Action figure size.
Yeah.
That's the smallest we've ever gone, is working on a couple action figures early in our career.
Yeah.
Patrick, we know how small you've gone, which is like that.
Yeah, it's quite, and it's my common size, I would say. But the biggest is something I've made for a movie advertisement or a DVD. There was the selling of a DVD for a movie, and the seller asked me to make the head of the dragons to put on the stand to promote the selling of a DVD. So it was something like maybe about 1 meter long and about 30 or 40 centimeter wide, something like that. But it was just the head of the dragon.
Mr. Dan, and maybe even talk about the thing behind you and how big that thing's going to get.
Okay, so first, the biggest one that I can recall working on was 38 feet, which is the length of a school bus. That was Bessie, the Lake Erie monster. So the skeleton currently hangs in the museum just around the corner from my office, but that was designed specifically to be that size so little kids could look up and I could say it's the size of the school bus you rode in on. But the skull for that was 7 feet long, so that's large enough that I could stand inside the jaws with a foot of room to spare. What you're seeing behind me is a maquette for a creature that I was originally commissioned to do full size, and it was going to be a 9-foot sculpture. Now I'm working on the bust. Primarily that's going to go to a museum exhibit, and we can get into that guy a little bit more later because I'll show you some of my materials.
That's awesome.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Christine is trying to get Doug linked up. We're a little concerned because he's out there in the wildfires in California. So she didn't get bored. She's right there on the phone. Starting with anatomy, for us, anatomy is critical. It's something we study continually. It's something that is integral to what we do, and it's something that I don't think we'll ever know enough about anatomy. Just going to pose that. How important is anatomy to you, Shiflet guys?
So it's so important. It's really everything. We started before the internet. We were sculpting, and so we were looking at bodybuilding magazines, and Schwarzenegger's Encyclopedia of Bodybuilding was a book that was really important to us. Mm-hmm. And so these muscles and their relationships and how they look under the skin, and how they work together was super important always to what we were doing. We started doing superheroes, but we didn't want them to look, you know, insanely big in some cases. We wanted them to be big, but to be realistic. Like this could be an actual guy, you know, and that was our thinking on it.
And we tell everybody reference and repetition. I mean, you've got to be looking at quality reference. Don't try and make it up. Even if you're just taking a picture of yourself in the pose and it seems kind of silly, there's still so much information there that use quality reference and look at nature. You know, that so many mammals have the same basic muscles, you know, whether it's a cheetah or a bird or a bear or a human, there's still the shoulders
and with creature design, we always say, you know, even if you're making up a creature out of whole cloth,
still refer back.
It needs to work biologically, you know,
to a cricket
and
or
when you
whatever it is.
And when you see things, when you see muscles, when you recognize muscles or joints that you recognize in the real world, and you know they work on a crazy creature, it establishes that creature in reality more. This thing could actually exist. I think that's what it tells people's brains, and this thing is possible.
Maria just posted a question. Y'all have any particular resources that you find most useful when it comes to learning anatomy as a sculptor? For myself and for Christine, we're big fans of Proco.com for human anatomy. And there's a myriad of things for comparative anatomy with animals. Dan, any thoughts on good resources for either animal or human?
I will say that it's a lot easier now to find those resources than it was when I was starting out. But I've had the luxury of dissecting a lot of those animals. Oh, they're stuck.
You're on.
It's a party now.
All right. We can stop teasing Doug. He's here and he's not on fire.
Stop.
I am so sorry.
Hi, Doug.
I'm so sorry.
That you made it. We were worried that you might have had a, emergency evacuation last night, so we're so glad you were able to make it.
No, it's I am sleep deprived, but this is all my fault. I just got the time wrong, so my apologies.
That's okay. You know what? They probably were getting tired of hearing the rest of us talk, so you're just
Yeah, really. Thank God.
Yeah, somebody also asked, is there any animal anatomy resources comparable to the Proco site?
Can you hold that question just for a sec? Since Doug just got in, take a nice deep breath. It's all good. This has been the nature of Lightbox Expo. If we're not upside down on the screen, we figure we're doing great. Can you just take 2 or 3 minutes?
There we go. Sure. I love it.
Perfect. Can you just take 2 or 3 minutes? We are, the rest of us did this, but just give us a little who you are and what you do, and just so that all the attendees can go, oh yeah, that's Doug. I know his work.
Sure. My name's Doug. I'm perpetually late for everything. I began sculpting in the early 90s after college, when I really didn't have any clue of what to do. And I sculpted throughout most of the 90s. And then I wanted to make my sculpture move. So I started doing 3D, computer 3D stuff. And I got really pretty addicted to that, which led to working at DreamWorks as a character technical director for 12 years. During that time, I was mostly rigging faces, but occasionally I was able to do some design work for faces, mostly. And then about 7 years ago, I quit DreamWorks to do my own thing again. And since then, I've been getting back to the mixed media sculpture that I did in the 90s, but also doing ceramics. And now I'm late.
Excellent. Well, welcome. We're delighted actually that you made it.
Thanks for having me.
We're answering a question about whether there's a animal anatomy reference similar to Proco.
Dan. That's
That's
you.
Okay, so I'm the wrong person to ask about the digital end of this because I'm very hands-on. So I learned my anatomy literally from the inside out by dissecting animals and working with the live ones. And then that was where the interest in taxidermy came. So I had to learn to rebuild them. I will say it's gotten a lot easier now. There are more resources for that than there ever were when I started. A really good one, if you're looking for like an anatomical model, I have one up on the shelf behind me, the little gorilla. That is from a place called June's Anatomy. Those are great. Atlas of Animal Anatomy, which there's a free PDF for that one in Google. And then I would say Terrell Whitlatch's books on creature design are probably the best I've seen. So check those out if you're not familiar with them.
Excellent. Cool. So there's actually a question in the chat that is, any tips for designing creatures with reference from life that aren't based on anything from life? Creatures / monsters that aren't based on any existing creatures.
I think other people are probably better in this. I'm going to just start with, I think the mechanics of life can always be added to something that is completely fictitious. So it doesn't necessarily have to be based on a gazelle or a gorilla, but you can use mechanical motions of an arachnid or that gazelle, and then use that joint to make something that is completely marvelous. But other guys, Dan, Brandon, Patrick, any thoughts?
Why don't you jump in, Shiflets? How do you create things that look like they could exist but don't?
Well, I think Colin just said it. I mean, you can take, you know, whether it's an elbow or a tooth or an eye. I think whatever planet you're on, animals are going to need certain things, and maybe like fins or mouths or something.
I think a big part of our process is looking at Wayne Barlow and then just ripping him off.
Yes.
Just Sculptor.
But yeah.
Ripping them off, right? Not really.
Influenced.
Homage. I meant to say.
The homage.
Yeah, I will say quite the same. I will say that if I have to do a creature, even if it's based on a drawing by someone, I always tend to try to think about the skeleton first, just to imagine what would be the joint and what would be the piece that will move together, and then from that thinking about the muscle that will make that skeleton move. So like that, you make something that is believable because it can move. You know that, okay, the femur, or it will not be called that way, but will move in that direction. So it needs a muscle in to make that movement. And then if you think about that, then your creature will become more believable, in my opinion.
Totally.
Can you keep talking, and I'm going to type the names of the animal anatomy book into the chat since people are asking for that. But perhaps Doug could jump in on that question.
I think the one thing that I would add to what's been said about the anatomy of the creature is also making sure that things like balance make sense in the creature. So if you're, you know, even if you're tacking a bunch of anatomy together from different creatures and you create something that, say it's a standing creature, if you can't figure out how it stands, if it looks like it would topple over, that's probably a problem.
Well said.
We were meeting Dan and Patrick in Paris a year and a half ago, and one of the highlights was not only, of course, the Louvre and the d'Orsay, was the Museum of Comparative Anatomy, which is a crazy compilation of, why don't you tell us a little bit about that, Dan? What your experience is? Obviously, you have a lot of background in that. What's it like to see all of that? How inspiring is it?
I would say that room, for me, it was as influential as walking into the Sistine Chapel, which is where I had my calling to become an artist. I walked in and was in awe, and I had Colin and Christine with me, and we were waiting to meet Linda Adair. And we walked in after 30 minutes of shooting reference in the lobby. We didn't even get past the opening sculpture, which is one of the best pieces I've ever seen. It's a life-size orangutan in Carrara marble strangling a native to protect its young. And so we were shooting this thing from every angle. We finally walked in and we spent hours on the first floor, not aware that there was a second floor with prehistoric skeletons and creatures. So I could have spent my entire visit to Paris in that museum alone. And I bought every book I could that had views of that place, because they had species that are now extinct, that you could look at the actual bones for reference.
When Linda Adair showed up a few minutes later, she asked the admission people, she said that she was meeting some sculptors there, and she didn't have to say anything else. The guy just photographing this one sculpture. It was really great. So I know we're not supposed to be doing questions towards the end, but people are asking all kinds of things. Do you guys have a suggestion of material that you might start off with for somebody who's just actually starting sculpting?
Sculpey medium blend is a good place to start, I think.
Jared and I really like Super Sculpey. Not everyone does, but Super Sculpey medium blend, which comes in a gray color now, so that it's more opaque, so that you can see the nicks and imperfections before you bake it. That's a really easy starting material for that's what we think. You know, we use Aves a lot of times now when we're making one-offs.
But Aves is kind of tricky, and
but
not
Aves
everybody
is
likes
tricky
it.
because it's getting hard as you use it.
Sculpey medium blend has good properties and just easy for beginners, I would think.
Yeah.
One of the nice things, we personally don't actually like the plasticky feel of it, because we work with water-based clay and oil-based clay, but one of the really great things is you can bake it in your oven. And if somebody was just starting with Sculpey and they were like, gosh, how do I do this? Where do you think they could find a video?
We have some videos on YouTube.
Oh, you guys have videos on how to sculpt. And where can somebody find that?
Shiflett Brothers, well, we have a sculpting forum, and there's lots of stuff in there, but on YouTube, Shiflett Brothers.
Yeah.
And we have over 50 videos, and it's lots of armature stuff. There's stuff where we're working in Aves, we're working in Super Sculpey, and we're just talking about our process.
And I know that Patrick and Doug also stream on Twitch, and so you would get a lot of information about sculpting with the materials that they work with, Fimo and water-based clay. And Dan, I don't know if you are currently doing anything in that arena, but I'm sure you will at some point. You'll show us how to dissect a hippopotamus in no time.
Yep.
That does take some time. I will. So I'm working on that. My problem is I'm a one-man show, and usually my processes are very messy. So you don't want to be getting body fluids on your camera or your iPhone.
Hey Dan, I'm a one-man show too. I do everything.
I heard rumors. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, this is actually a really great question. How do you guys avoid repetition in your fantasy representations, seeing a lot of the same creatures or hybrids of the same these days? More importantly, how do you avoid the trap of trending popular imagery in your work? So remember the question, I'm just going to tell a quick story. We were judging Infected by Art a couple of years ago. And there's thousands and thousands of entries. And we did a talk about the judging process at ILXCon that year. And so we had all the judges talking. And when we first got together, everybody was like, what is up with the dragons?
Too many dragons.
Dragons. And dragons are great. But you have to know that, like, a lot of people do really, really awesome dragons. So if you're going to do a dragon, you better bring something new, right? If you're doing a ripoff of somebody else, you know, everybody's going to say, you know what, that just looks like the Shiflets, you know, and you know, unless you're going to do it way, way, way better, which you're probably not. Find your own voice. So how do you guys avoid repetition?
Yeah, that's a great question, because we do a lot of stuff. Like, one of our go-to poses is like the what I call like the guitar kicking over the speaker the guitarist kicking over the speaker, that kind of action pose of stepping up or stepping down.
Mm-hmm.
So we'll do that over and over. And I'm like, Jesus, if we do one more person
Yeah.
kind of kicking over the speaker with the axe in their hand, you know, and we're doing it over here and we're doing it up here. And so we just, that is a problem. I'm not saying we avoid it well, but I do recognize that you can get into that. And it's just like a dragon, you know, on your 10th dragon, you're going, geez, what can
How do I change this
do? I
up?
take off the wings? Is it two-headed, you know, just to shake it up a little.
So, Patrick, you've been doing some sculptures for a game that's based on Egypt, and of course, those creatures from Egypt, right? Bastet and Anubis, you know, all of those things have been around for literally thousands of years. So, how do you approach a subject matter that's done again and again, and do something that's exciting?
Yeah, it was part of me, but most of the work was previously made by the concept artist on that game, and it was Adrian Smith. So he's if you don't know him, look at his work. But I think you know him. He is a very good drawer and very good concept artist, and he has done all the concept art for that game. So my job was to translate that from 2D to 3D. You have some adaptation then to make, just to make sure that it works in 360 degrees, because sometimes the drawers make shortcuts. So it works on a drawing, but it doesn't work on a 3 dimension. So you have adaptation, and you have all the back to consider and to design based on what you see from the 3/4 view or front view from the drawer. It's so I can't say it was the concept come from me. Yeah, it was the ideas were coming from Adrian Smith, and but to make that originals, I think what he has done, he has really mixed that with his own imagery. So it's a bit more dark than what we used to see on that kind of subject.
Cool. Doug, you have a lot of pieces that are on similar scale, and yet your diversity is mind-boggling. How do you approach that?
First off, I'd like to say that I don't think that repetition is necessarily a bad thing, especially if you're copying yourself.
Doug, we just love you. You just do your
I mean, I will until I'm dead do dead people playing dress up, and that's okay with me. But in terms of finding new things and not copying other people, there's lots of people whose artwork I love, and there's people whose artwork I love in a way that's like, oh, that's I just love it. And then there's other people's artwork who I wish that I could do that, and I want to do that. Oh God, I wish I had that idea, or I wish I could, sculpt like that. I don't look at those people when I'm looking for inspiration. Keep that away. And I may draw inspiration from those people to learn. Like, oh, I love the way Eros Colacantes, or however he says his name, did that nose. And then maybe I'll try to put that nose on something I did, something reminiscent of that nose. But I'm never, ever going to go and look at one of his sculptures and say, I got to make that. It's just abhorrent to me. I think for me, the number one way that I try to find something new is I try I try to become a watcher of the work rather than an interactor with the work. So while I'm sculpting, I'm becoming a director rather than an actor, and I'm watching what's happening and mildly detached from it. And so my hands are doing things that I don't know what I'm doing. And then I'm just watching and I say, okay, I like that, keep going with that, or that's ugly, we're going to change that. So my aesthetic is the director, and you try to create a detachment. And when you begin, maybe you have no idea what you're doing. Maybe it's as specific as a biped, and or maybe you're just working with shapes. Maybe you're thinking, I'm going to have a triangle head. And what kind of triangle head, I don't know yet. But then you make a triangle, and then you are the director, and how do you like that triangle to be a head? And
that's an interesting thing. Doug is talking about how he does his concept development. Could the other three of you actually talk about that? Do you do sketches? Do you work with models? How do you create and realize the concepts?
Well, we definitely feel what Doug is saying, because we start a lot of armatures and we don't know what it's going to be.
We can't draw.
We can't draw at all. So we do no sketches whatsoever. And in fact, if a big company would say, draw out the sketch, your pose for the Incredible Hulk, we would say, we'll rough it out in clay overnight, and we'll send you photos of that. And that's easier for us. But like I said, we start pieces, and sometimes we're not sure if it's a male, female creature. We just start bending the wire, and our process is kind of make it up as you go along, trial and error.
And if we did try to draw it, it would not resemble anything.
The finished product.
Yeah, one wouldn't have anything to do with the other, because they all kind of change as we're going along.
Exactly.
So would you say that that's kind of a very instinctive approach? You have years of experience and study and practice, but then you can kind of rely more on where your instinct is pulling you as you're working?
That's right. A lot of it is like, should this guy have wings on him? And then we'll stick some wings on him. And then, no, not those. What about horns like this? That looks pretty badass. Like, that's our whole thing. And then maybe you show it to Jared. Jared shows it to me. And it's all trial and error. It's all just see what looks cool.
And it's a roller coaster. Sometimes we might love it, and then in the morning you wake up and you hate it. I mean, it's all
about the design in the end for us. Yeah. You know what I mean?
We often do the same thing where doing multiple horns. Which one do you like?
Right. Yeah.
She doesn't say all of them.
Then we'd be making a dragon.
Yeah. And so I actually just want to jump in with something that, and this is just a word of caution and to expand on what Doug is talking about. We were in a London museum. I'm gonna feed this question to you, and because you know which museum it was. But at the bottom, we walked into this bottom floor, and there's a whole wing of people doing things.
Yeah, it was the National Gallery, and it's on a kind of like in the basement. But you walk around the gallery, and there are all these really old paintings, and they're labeled copyist of. Follower of,
in the manner of, and so art history doesn't treat copyists well, because they're saying, okay, well, it's nice painting, but you did it in the style of Bouguereau, so we're going to acknowledge Bouguereau, but not you. So we always encourage people to be inspired by people whose work you love, but definitely find your own voice, take it your own direction. People will respect your work, and it will resonate with people more when it really comes from your own voice.
Everything Jared sculpts should say in the manner of Brandon Schiffler. That's my opinion.
That's going to be your history. So there's that interesting question that passed by. Well, okay, so I'm going to ask you a quick question. Somebody had asked, who's a historical sculptor that you've been inspired by? We know he's Bernini, so Patrick, you can't say that.
I can't say someone else. I'm sorry.
You're gonna say Bernini?
Yeah.
Bernini.
Yes. Okay,
I
two.
of course love Bernini. I love Carpeaux and Carrière-Belleuse. You can tell me how to say his name. Both French sculptors. I found their work very influential. Brandon and Jared.
Bernini was a freak. I mean, he's obviously one of the freakiest. We obviously, I mean, we were kind of inspired by Rodin somewhat. I think Rodin had a sort of unfinished feel, which we kind of have in a lot of his pieces, had this, a rough hewn kind of look, which was intentional. And so we feel like we have some kinship with that. We're not on his level, but we have that same sort of,
There was a woman that worked with Rodin. Well, I think his girlfriend, Camille Claudette,
yeah,
something. She was really good. People
she was
sometimes
amazing too.
confuse their work, but she was a great artist in her own right.
Dan?
So Michelangelo was a huge influence. That was the reason that I went to Rome in the first place. He was my thesis topic for history, and I eventually moved into the valley in the Carrara Mountains, where he learned to carve and did a marble apprenticeship. So I was actually a classic trained marble carver before I kind of veered this direction. Of course, Bernini, if you don't know who he is, look him up. And then I would say the best animal sculptor, in my opinion, that I've seen is Antoine Barrier, who, if you want animals in just dynamic action, he rocks my world every time I look at his stuff.
Totally agree.
We
So
agree.
basically the French.
Yeah, the French
It's all about
sculptors,
French.
they're winning.
Mm-hmm.
The French and the Italians. So
Okay,
Doug.
Doug, be the contrarian. What you got?
Well, I'm glad that Brandon mentioned, oh shit, now I've forgotten his name again.
Rodin.
Rodin, yeah, because I was thinking, what's that guy's name? And now Brandon reminded me, and then I forgot it again. But I'm sorry, Brandon. I'm afraid Jared is my biggest inspiration.
Son of a bitch.
I'll PayPal you back 20.
So somebody was asking, and I think this is applicable to quite a few of you, if you have any advice or thoughts about sculpting robotic or machine type creatures, humans, in traditional materials.
It's long. It's long. It's a long process. I have one there actually that was made a couple of years ago, and it's all made in Magic Sculpt. So because the material is very great, because you mix and you can sound and you can have something that is very clean and very precise in terms of volumes and so on. So if you go in a traditional way, I would go with that kind of material that becomes hard, and you can sand, cut, sharp with a knife, and polish with a sand and that kind of thing. And I would also say or recommend just to integrate some. You can integrate some metal parts or tubes and that kind of thing, because it will make the things more believable, and you can really do mechanical parts that works, that you can move and that kind of thing. So.
Patrick, can you say the name of the material you were just talking about? I'm going to type
it's Magic Sculpt. I don't know if you can see well.
Okay, I'll type it in. And we'll find
in the United States, the container looked different. If anyone, the Shiflets have mentioned Aves, Magic Sculpt is essentially the same thing. And I know Dan's used it on a scale that I wouldn't even dream of using it, because he's done like monumental sculptures with it, which is crazy.
So Doug, since you're talking, a lot of your little ceramic sculptures, they do have these robotic and mechanical things.
Yeah, I've got one right here which actually broke. But so you know, my work is so messy and organic in general that like doing mechanical stuff is not a nice thing. And I did this one just by taking found objects, a lot of Legos, and stamping them in there. So like you take something and you make a negative of it and people aren't going to recognize where it comes from. So when I say I never do any use molds at all, it's kind of a lie, because sometimes I will take Legos, billions of Lego pieces that my children no longer use, and just press them into the clay. But in general, I don't spend a lot of time doing, you know, mechanical stuff.
And Dan, you made the Ripper, which was an ILXCon commission a couple years ago.
And the Mud Puppy.
And the Mud Puppy. You do a ton of stuff that's incorporating both living creatures and these kind of mechanical. What's your approach to making that work?
And I'm actually going to expand on the question just a little bit by saying, how do you make sure that it still looks like your sculpture and not, oh, wow, there's a paperclip? You know, that you can blend it in with your style rather than a bunch of stuck together parts.
So I would start by saying that I research things extensively, and that's probably the historian training. It's just how I'm wired to do that, and I enjoy the research. But there comes a point where you have to limit that and get to work. And I usually start by drawing, and my drawings are very gestural. And what I'm trying to do is capture a mood, capture the essence. And then it takes sometimes 6 months or longer to translate that into something that is a static sculpture that when you look at it has to believe like it could come to life at any given moment. So the Ripper was actually a piece that started, I had finished the skull and it was, I was trying to steer away from the Terminator look. And it just sat in my studio for years, and actually somebody saw a picture of it in the background of something else I was showing them, and they said, what would it take to finish that? And I said, a commission, and they said, okay, build it. And so then I had to really think about it. But that did have a lot of natural anatomy in it, and the body of that thing was basically a velociraptor dialed down. And the object was just, can I make something that's absolutely wicked? And so the storyline, I had to, for myself, come up with a narrative of why would this creature exist? Why would it look this way? And it was built by a company, and they were released out into the savannah to hunt poachers. So the idea was they would have a heat tracking system that would lock in on anything that was inorganic, and they would just attack it. So if you took a vehicle, if you took a weapon, they would target you and go after you. And then they would just wear out. So they were solar powered. So he's got quite a bit of found objects that were naturally deteriorated that were welded in. And then I would just sculpt the transition areas in between.
Cool. We had a couple quick questions. One was on, is anybody using a 3D printer? And the other one was hydrocal polymer or to mold polymer clay, yay or nay? Anybody have thoughts on either of those? Anybody using a 3D printer?
Yeah.
Nobody.
I do. I have a small one, a small FDM one, but it's just for very early study or maybe doing. I try to think about that just to make the quick armature maybe and cover it with magic sculpt, because it become hard enough so that you can put after your clay on it, on top of it. So,
this
for
is
example.
Patrick's 3D prints of a piece that he was going to come out here in April, and we were going to cast it into bronze. This is just the mock-up print. He sent a very high-resolution printout for us to work on. So
this was just for scale, really rough print.
And it was super helpful to us because we were trying to figure out how the mold was going to happen in the wax and the whole bronze casting process. So it was very useful to us to not just see the 2D images, but to actually be able to look at this printed model and say, oh, okay, this is kind of what it's going to look like.
That's cool.
The hydrocal question, anybody?
Yeah, so the hydrocal, if you're using polymer clay, what I would say, if you don't have a lot of experience with a rigid mold, which is what plaster hydrocal is, I would make that mold and keep the clay soft. Don't bake it, because it'll be very unforgiving if you don't set your seam line correctly. If you want to cast in hydrocal, I actually have something similar right here. So this, I live in a 131-year-old house that I'm doing some restoration. And so I pulled a mold right from the existing architecture. I'm resculpting the pieces and then hand casting 60 of these spindles in resin so that they will never deteriorate. And I will have a mold if anything happens to one of the other originals. So this is a hydrocal cast. This could go outside if I sealed it, but it won't be as durable or as lightweight as the resin will.
So somebody's asking, so we mentioned IlexCon, and of course we're all at Lightbox Expo. What are some of the conventions or expos that you've gone to and you really like for showing off your work or to get inspiration?
So Jared and I did, we did San Diego Comic-Con for 27 years.
A long, long
and
time.
I think
many moons.
that was our favorite show for a while, but in recent years it's definitely been Monsterpalooza in Los Angeles. It's a very sculptor centric show.
That's what I was gonna say.
It's not just sculptors, but
every booth is some kind of,
there are makeup effects artists, there are maquette sculptors like us in our vein. So a lot of the best sculptors who do that kind of thing are in the same room. It's a great show.
It's like sculpting Mecca.
I think now it may be difficult to get into that show. So if you're having trouble getting into that show, I would recommend trying to get into Son of Monsterpalooza, which is smaller and not as popular, not as many big name sculptors, but that's I think likely a good stepping stone into Monsterpalooza.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
I do both. I love both. I do equally well at the two of them. So I wouldn't not recommend doing Son of Monsterpalooza. Nudge, nudge, shiftlets.
Oh, I agree. Getting into Son of Monsterpalooza and showing Elliot, the promoter, that you can be nice and be there in the morning and not break down early and generally be a normal person, it will probably get you into Monsterpalooza. Yeah.
Yeah, also Lightbox Expo that we're at right now is online this year, but we attended last year the actual physical show in Pasadena, and it's very heavily concept art based, but it's a wonderful convention. It's very artist centric. Everything they're doing is really to cater to the artists that are coming there. They have fabulous sponsors. I think something like 10% of the people that were showing work there got meetups with major companies to look at their work. They just do a really great job, and we're super grateful to have been able to be part of this online this year too.
The show looked amazing last year.
That's what Brandon was telling me.
Jared and I were determined to go to it in person, before the plague hit, and we hope to still go in the future.
We're looking forward to it.
So there's a question here, and then I have a question for all of you too. Is it possible to become a clay artist who makes stylized / Fantasia characters and also be inspired by Bernini or Michelangelo?
I'm going to go with absolutely.
I think all of us are that. Yeah.
Definitely.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and then, sorry, go ahead.
Just do what you love and do what makes you happy. And even if you have a weird style, somebody might see it and say, hey, that's great.
I think to expand just on what Jared said, I think that's the sort of a pivotal key to being an artist. Do what you are truly passionate about. Don't follow what anybody else was. But if it's coming from your heart and something that really fires you, that's that people are drawn to that. The collectors are drawn to that. The galleries, everything goes your way if you're being true to what really rocks your world.
Yeah, so that ties in with another question that went by a while ago, but they were saying that they felt that the industry was pushing them to doing more digital sculpting because of the speed of the process. And so we don't have Mark Newman on the panel today, but he's a good example of somebody who has successfully navigated working digitally for the industry and also working traditionally with Sculpey and bronze and all of these other things to do his own personal vision. I think Patrick is a great example of somebody who's a traditional uses traditional materials, but has a wonderful career sculpting. So I think
Sculpting digitally.
well,
Mhm.
yeah, he sculpts both ways.
Yes.
But you can still sculpt traditionally and have a successful career. And that ties in with what Colin's saying, that, you know, if you follow your passion, it's really crazy, but your world will align around what it
Right.
is that you want to create in your life.
Right.
So I have a question for everybody. If you could go back right now with all the experience in life and knowledge you have and tell your younger self one thing, what would you tell yourself relative to your career?
That's a great question.
Hmm.
I'll jump in on this one. I actually have a picture of my 4-year-old self I keep in the studio to remind myself that I'm doing things that this guy would think was cool. And this was me in preschool. My mom, remember, biology professor, let me dress up as a herpetologist. So I have a frog in my pocket, a snake, and a little pith helmet on.
You don't look different.
Yeah, sometimes you know, when I'm getting worried about the details of a project, I just stop and think, would 4-year-old Dan be happy with this, and would he be excited about it? And he was pretty good judge of what I should be doing. The other thing I would say is that it is not a linear path to find success as an artist. You're going to do things you have no idea are going to open doors for you down the road, and other things you think are a home run right now will be a swing and a miss, but they were still worth doing.
Yes.
I love it. I agree with everything you've said.
And Patrick?
It's a difficult one, but I will say believe in you, because that's probably something I have not done when I could have started as a sculptor, and I did not think enough about what I really want, that it was really what I wanted to do. So just don't listen to people or the bad voice that says, no, don't do that, it will be too hard, or it will be too, okay, just believe in you, believe in what you do, and like that, maybe, yeah, I would have gained some years in my career.
Brandon and Jared?
I think Jared and I have just had sort of a fantasy-like career. So I think if we had something we would tell our younger selves is study business more, the business part of our careers. The artistically, we've really just always sculpted exactly the stuff we wanted to sculpt, you know, so that part has been kind of dreamlike and awesome. But it would be about learning a little more about business and how to handle that. Like, I think in the beginning, Jared and I would, if we really wanted to do a project, our price would drop so low. And we had prices based on how much we wanted to do it. And I'm not sure that was always smart, you know, but yeah, I think that would be it.
Expect it to be a roller coaster. You know what Dan said about, you might do something in 2 nights that people love, and then work on something for a year that nobody gives a shit about. And you're like, wait, what?
Yeah.
And that's the mercurial thing of art. And something else, you know, like Colin was saying, if you are doing what you love and you're just footloose and fancy free, that kind of comes through. People can see that oh, they were really having fun on this one, and that somehow,
that's right.
people can somehow get a sense of that, I think.
For sure.
Awesome. And Doug, younger self?
I'm everything that these other folks have said, I really would like to say to my younger self. For me, maybe specifically, accept yourself as an artist. I've made stuff my whole life, But it wasn't until I was in my mid-20s that I stepped back and I thought, well, okay, you're an artist. You're doing art all the time. You're an artist. And once you start to view yourself as an artist, you can take yourself more seriously. I imagine everybody watching this, given the audience, probably has made it to that point. I hope so. If you haven't, look at yourself in the mirror. If you make art, you are an artist.
Awesome. Colin?
Enjoy your hair while you have it.
Yes, brother. Waiting on that CRISPR gene editing to come through. And
He's got more hair than you think.
It's interesting because as you guys were talking, I'm like, I was going to say that. No, I was going to say that. Yeah. Oh, come on. All right, what am I left with here? And almost everything you're saying totally resonates with what I'd like to tell my younger self. And there are many things. One of them would be, you are the best teacher out there. And this goes for everyone. You are your own best teacher. And if I had to do it over again, I would have liked to have applied myself to the study of the classic works earlier. If I could have hidden out with Bernini in Rome, locked myself in that museum when I was a child, that would have been a delight. But some of these things you don't get to till a little bit later, and then realize, oh my gosh, this education is right out there right now, and it's all around me. So yeah, I would have liked to have picked all of your answers first, but I'm going to go with that one, and then I'm going to pass it to Christine.
We're actually going to have to end, so if you want to hear my answer, you'll have to tune into a future episode.
That's a good ending.
On top of what everybody's saying, I agree absolutely. It's like you're speaking to my heart. But what I've been talking about this weekend to a lot of the younger artists is it will help you a lot if you figure out failure for yourself, because you are going to fail. Sometimes you do a major faceplant kapow and it hurts like the dickens. And sometimes you're just juggling so many balls and you're like, oh my God, this is going so great and I'm not doing that. I'm not doing these things. And most of us artists have a pretty heavy-handed self-critic, and whatever is not working quite right, you're going to be waking up at 3 in the morning going, oh, why did I say that? Why did I do that?
We did that all weekend long.
Yeah, how come they don't like this piece that I just did? And so you're going to be confronted with it. And so you need to figure out for yourself who you're going to be in the face of that. Are you going to be somebody that goes to bed and pulls the curtains over your head for, a month? We know people who've derailed their careers for 10 years, a whole decade, because they had a massive failure. And a failure is not the end of the story. Okay, so figure out how it is that you're going to pick yourself back up, get back in the studio, get to work, and make it happen.
As Dan was saying, yeah, you got plenty of swings and misses. I've ended up on my face so many times. The only thing that's different now is that I'm familiar with the feeling.
His nose is flat.
Yeah.
So really quick, before we wrap up, I'd love it if all of you would tell everybody how they can find more of your work. For us, you can find me at christinepoole.com, KRISTINEPOOLE.com. Colin?
ColinPoole.com, ColinPoole.com. Patrick, how do we find you?
Patrick Masson _sculptor on Instagram. That's probably the best way to find me.
Awesome. Dan?
Instagram's the best way. There's how to spell my name.
Yeah.
That was
Nice.
We need that.
Well done. Doug?
Dugasaurus.com, DUGOSAURUS.com. Go to, if you came here with questions, go to my about, read my about. In there, there's a link to a FAQ. It is a long FAQ. So anything that I could have said here, I probably said there.
So it's FAQ, just in case there are people from other countries, is frequently asked questions.
Brandon?
Yes, it's shifletbrothers.com. SHIFLETT, brothers spelt out. We have a sculpting forum on Facebook, Shiflet Brothers Sculpting Forum, with 30,000 members. It's a resource. A lot of people better than us, and you can get a lot of questions answered on Instagram and Twitter. We're at Shiflet Bros, BROS.
Yeah, if you're a sculptor, check out our sculpting forum. We keep it friendly, and helpful, and it's 356 days a year.
It's awesome.
24/7.
Very
It's
cool.
a huge, great community.
We're grateful for what you've created there. It's massive, fascinating, and inspiring.
And you can also find
you.
us on Facebook and Instagram. So if you look for us, you'll find us there. All of us do process posts. We talk about sculpting all the time. We love talking about sculpting. Please don't hesitate to contact, I'm just going to say this for all of you. Don't hesitate to contact any of us if you have questions that we might be able to help with, because we'd love to have that conversation with you. So to everybody who attended, I want to say thank you so much for coming along. We've just had a really wonderful weekend. So many great questions, so many people interested in sculpture. It's really made us happy. And we want to send just a huge, huge thank you to all of our panelists for your generosity, sharing your creativity and your ideas and your imagination. It's such a huge gift to all of us and all of the community. So thanks again, everybody. Keep creating.
Thank you.
Thank you, guys. Thank you.
Sorry I was late.
Take care.
Take care, guys.
Bye-bye.
It's great.
Bye-bye.